Most people do not lose their future in one spectacular mistake. They lose it through a plumbing failure. I have watched people spend 20 years working hard, earning raises, upgrading apartments, upgrading cars, upgrading screens, upgrading vacations, upgrading their public image, and somehow ending up with less real control over their lives than they had when they were younger and poorer. That is not bad luck. That is not a character flaw. That is a system leak. You can make a respectable income and still live inside a broken wealth pipeline. You can be disciplined at work and reckless in private. You can look responsible to the outside world while your financial life quietly bleeds pressure from 8 or 9 different points at once. And when that happens, you do not feel rich. Even if your salary sounds impressive, you feel hurried, you feel behind. You feel one surprise away from panic. You feel as if money arrives with one hand and disappears through 10 others. I have spent my life studying capital allocation. Most people hear that phrase and think of balance sheets, acquisitions, insurance float, stock portfolios, and billion-dollar decisions. That is only the large version. The small version is your life. Your paycheck is capital. Your habits are your management team. Your routines are your internal controls. Your subscriptions, your debt, your tax choices, your idle cash, your spending reflexes, your excuses, your timelines, your appetite for status, your tolerance for confusion, all of that is capital allocation. So when I look at an ordinary household, I do not begin with what they earn. I begin with where the pressure is escaping, because wealth is not built first by brilliance. It is built by containment. Before a pipeline can deliver power, it has to stop leaking. Before capital can compound, it has to stop wandering off into other people's business models. And that is what most people never understand. They think their main problem is not enough money coming in. Sometimes that is true. Often the other half is that their existing pipeline has so many silent leaks that even a meaningful raise only increases the speed at which money disappears. You do not need a motivational speech. You need a leak audit. The first leak is what I call the order leak. Most people pay themselves last. They act as if their own future is the least urgent bill in the room. The paycheck arrives, and immediately the money is marched out to rent, phone plans, streaming services, dinners, delivery apps, social obligations, convenience purchases, upgrades, and everything else that screams for attention in the first 72 hours. Then, after the noise has been fed, they look down and ask whether there is anything left for savings. There usually is not. So they tell themselves a story. They say life is expensive. They say next month will be different. They say when the raise comes, then the savings will begin. I have heard that story in one form or another for decades. It is one of the most expensive stories ever told. When you pay, you are announcing to your own system that your future has lower priority than your current impulses. You are training your life to treat your freedom as an afterthought. That is not a budgeting issue. That is a control issue. The order matters in capital allocation. The first claim on cash reveals the real hierarchy. If your first claim is always consumption, then consumption owns you. If your first claim is always your future reserve, then your future begins to own a piece of your present behavior. That is why I have always believed that the sequence is not cosmetic. It is structural. Some part of it should be moved out of the blast radius of your daily appetites. Not because savings is glamorous, not because discipline is fashionable, because if your future does not get paid first, it usually does not get paid at all. A person who says, "I will save what remains," is usually saying, "I will protect myself only after every other claimant has had its turn." That is how workers remain workers, long after they are tired of being workers. Salary comes in, life skims it, the month resets. Nothing durable accumulates, then years go by. I would rather see a person of ordinary income establish an automatic first claim on cash than see a person of high income make 100 emotional promises about what they intend to save later. Automatic beats admirable, order beats intention, structure beats mood. The second leak is the interest trap. Bad debt is one of the ugliest businesses in the world, especially if you are the customer and not the owner. Credit card companies do not need you to be evil. They only need you to be slightly impatient, mildly disorganized, and consistently hopeful. That is enough. A person buys little comforts they cannot truly afford, tells themselves they will clean it up next month, and then discovers the mathematics has quietly turned against them. When the rate is high enough, the debt becomes a machine that eats your future labor before you have even performed it. That is what interest on bad debt really is. It is rented time. It is tomorrow's work sold at a discount. So today's impulse can feel legitimate. People love rewards points, cashback, miles, perks, and all the decorative language that wraps around consumer credit. But if you are carrying a balance at punishing rates, the ornament does not matter. The house is on fire, and you are admiring the wallpaper. A great many households are not poor because they buy too much luxury. They are poor because they normalize financing ordinary life. Gifts on debt, clothes on debt, weekends on debt, small status purchases on debt, convenience on debt. When that habit becomes culturally normal, people stop feeling the danger. That is when the trap closes. Because once you become emotionally comfortable with bad debt, you start living in reverse. Instead of past labor paying for present life, future labor begins paying for past choices. You think you are buying objects. What you are really doing is mortgaging flexibility. And flexibility is the beginning of dignity. I have always liked ownership that sends me cash without demanding drama. Bad debt is the mirror opposite. It sends you drama without sending you ownership. It makes you feel active while making you fragile. It rewards impatience and penalizes recovery. A household with bad debt is not just paying interest, it is paying an anxiety tax, it is paying a sleep tax, it is paying a negotiation tax, because people under pressure make weak decisions. And weak decisions create more debt, more dependence, more urgency, more noise. That is how the interest trap becomes a psychological trap. The third leak is the buffer gap. Life does not have to destroy you to set you back. A flat tire can do it, a dental bill can do it, a delayed paycheck can do it, a broken appliance can do it, an ordinary inconvenience, arriving at the wrong moment, can knock a person into borrowing. Borrowing can knock them into interest. Interest can knock them into chronic instability, and then they spend the next year calling that bad luck. It was not really bad luck. It was insufficient buffer. I call this the shock absorber principle. A person without reserves experiences every bump in the road as a collision. A person with reserves experiences the same bump as an annoyance. That difference changes far more than the bank balance. It changes temperament. It changes bargaining power. It changes the kind of work you tolerate. It changes the kind of boss you obey. It changes how long you can think before reacting. It changes whether a surprise becomes a problem or a catastrophe. People underestimate the strategic value of cash reserves because reserves look passive. They sit there. They do not tell a dramatic story. They do not turn heads at dinner. They do not allow for heroic social media posts. But a reserve fund is one of the purest forms of private power in the world. It buys you reaction time, and reaction time is frequently the thin line between a rational choice and a desperate one. You do not build a reserve because you expect life to hate you. You build a reserve because life is noisy, machines break, markets wobble, hours get cut, bodies get tired, families need help. And if every normal interruption sends you into financing mode, then you do not live in a wealth system. You live in a repair cycle. You spend your life patching holes that would have been minor if you had simply built a thicker wall before the storm. The fourth leak is financial blindness. A surprising number of adults know the price of luxury they cannot afford better than they know the monthly structure of their own life. They know headlines, they know gossip, they know what a neighbor upgraded, they know what influencers claim to earn, but ask them what percentage of last month's cash flow went to fixed costs, or what their annual subscriptions total, or what their effective savings rate is, or how much lifestyle inflation followed their last raise, and the room gets quiet. That silence is expensive. You cannot direct what you refuse to measure. When I evaluate a business, I want to know what comes in, what goes out, where the margins are, where the waste is hiding, what assumptions are false, and which costs are sticky. I do not call that obsessive. I call that sane. Yet many individuals run their personal finances with less oversight than a mediocre hot dog stand. They do not know the revenue. They do not know the expenses. They do not know the leak points. They only know the feeling. And feelings are terrible accountants. This is where lifestyle inflation does so much damage. A raise comes in and the person acts as though their new income belongs entirely to their new identity. The apartment rises, the car rises, the travel rises, the dining rises, the subscription stack rises, the wardrobe rises, the image rises, the expectations rise. And because all of that rises together, the sense of progress never quite arrives. That is one of the cruel jokes of undirected earning. The more the income rises, the more your cost base learns to chase it. Soon you are not wealthier. You are just carrying a more expensive version of the same dependence. I call that the mirror trap. Your financial life looks larger in the reflection, but your actual control has barely changed. You still need the next paycheck. You still fear interruption. You still feel pressure every month. You just have better shoes while feeling it. The fifth leak is recreational identity. A lot of people do not merely spend on hobbies. They use hobbies to purchase a version of themselves. And when identity gets entangled with spending, the numbers become difficult to challenge. The person is no longer buying golf gear, performance parts, endless beauty spending, luxury fitness culture, niche equipment, collector items, shopping habits, or lifestyle accessories. They are buying proof. Proof that they belong to a tribe. Proof that they have taste. Proof that they are progressing. Proof that they are successful enough to participate in an expensive script. This is a dangerous category because the money rarely exits in one giant dramatic chunk. It leaves as a steady stream of justified little outflows. That is how many leaks work. The amount is small enough to defend, but large enough to accumulate. I am not against enjoyment. I am against unconscious tribute. If your favorite pastime is quietly eating the capital that could have bought you time, choice, and reduced dependence, then you should at least have the honesty to name the trade. Too many people call that self-expression. What it really is, in many cases, is renting an identity from the marketplace. And the marketplace is always happy to help. It knows exactly how to convert insecurity into recurring revenue. That is why modern consumption often targets emotion more than utility. It is not selling you the object. It is selling you the temporary relief of feeling like the kind of person who owns the object. That relief fades quickly. The payment often does not. The sixth leak is what I call the ceiling illusion. Many people become so fixated on saving small sums that they never confront the larger question of earning power. Savings matters, containment matters, leak control matters. I have spent this whole conversation on that subject, but there is a limit to how much you can save. There is no equivalent fixed ceiling on what you can earn if you become more valuable, more useful, more skilled, more trusted, or more difficult to replace. A person can coupon, cut their way into slightly better margins. They cannot usually coupon, cut their way into financial sovereignty. At some point, you have to stop acting as though defense alone wins the game. Defense keeps you alive. Offense changes your position. This is one of the most common mistakes I see in personal finance talk. People become obsessed with shrinking their life without upgrading their earning engine. They try to optimize the leftovers while ignoring the source. That is backward. You need both. You need containment and expansion. You need a tighter pipeline and a stronger pump. If you only focus on saving, you risk building a personality around deprivation. If you only focus on earning, you risk feeding a bigger, leakier system. But if you combine the two, then something powerful starts to happen. Each extra dollar earned has a cleaner path. Each dollar saved has a better chance of remaining in your control. Each decision compounds on a base that is no longer sabotaged by hidden waste. I tell people this all the time. Do not just ask how to spend less. Ask how to become harder to ignore. Ask how to develop skills the market respects. Ask how to negotiate better. Ask how to create a second stream. Ask how to convert reputation into income. Ask how to own some part of what scales. The saving side has a floor and a ceiling. The value creation side has far more sky above it. Workers who never think like owners often believe money is found only by trimming. Owners know money is also built by designing better inflows. The seventh leak is the tax leak. Taxes are not glamorous to talk about, which is one reason so many people remain careless around them. But indifference is expensive. A person will spend hours hunting for tiny discounts, while casually surrendering much larger amounts through ignorance, inattention, or refusal to learn the legal structures available to them. That is upside-down behavior. Now, let me be clear. I am not talking about fantasy loopholes, reckless schemes, or anything improper. I am talking about understanding the rules well enough to stop volunteering unnecessary losses. Tax, advantaged accounts, retirement wrappers, business structures, where appropriate timing decisions, asset location, legal shelters that exist plainly in the system. These are not tricks. They are part of the operating environment. The world is not divided into people who pay tax and people who do not. It is divided in large part into people who learn the rules and people who finance everyone else's ignorance. One of the most revealing things in life is watching how often ordinary people treat taxes as a weather event, while sophisticated people treat taxes as a design variable. That difference compounds. And because it compounds quietly, it gets ignored. A few percentage points preserved year after year can become astonishing amounts of retained capital across a working life. That retained capital then produces earnings. Those earnings remain more sheltered, and the loop reinforces itself. This is why ignorance in finance is not neutral. It has an owner. Somebody benefits from your not knowing. Somebody benefits from your not measuring. Somebody benefits from your not moving sooner. Somebody benefits from your confusion. If you want to build wealth, you have to become less useful to the systems that profit from your passivity. The eighth leak is delay. This one ruins more futures than incompetence. People wait to invest because they want certainty. They wait because the market looks high. They wait because the economy looks shaky. They wait because they do not know enough. They wait because they want a more elegant plan. They wait because they tell themselves they will begin after the next raise, the next move, the next calmer season, the next cleaner month, the next tax refund, the next whatever. Delay feels harmless because nothing dramatic happens on the day you postpone. That is exactly why it is so dangerous. The bill does not arrive with sound effects. It arrives as lost compounding. It arrives as fewer years in the market. It arrives as smaller future optionality. It arrives as a larger burden on the older version of you. A year of delay in your 20s and 30s is not just 1 year lost. It is many years of unbuilt layers. It is seeds never planted. It is ownership never started. It is capital never given a chance to learn how to reproduce. Most people think investing begins when you feel smart enough. No, it begins when you become honest enough to admit that leaving excess cash idle indefinitely while inflation chews at purchasing power is not prudence. It is erosion. You do not need omniscience to begin. You need a reasonable structure, a reserve for shocks, a process for consistent contributions, a diversified approach that can survive disappointment, an understanding that some money is meant to protect, some money is meant to grow, and some money is allowed to be exposed within limits. You can actually survive. The great irony is that people who delay investing often think they are avoiding risk. In reality, they are choosing a different risk. They are choosing the risk of stagnation. They are choosing the risk of needing more labor later because they refuse to let capital start working earlier. They are choosing the risk of permanent dependency on earned income. That is not safety. That is delayed fragility. And underneath all these leaks sits a deeper problem. Most people have never built a personal money system. They have built reactions. They react to bills. They react to marketing. They react to stress. They react to peers. They react to boredom. They react to raises. They react to emergencies. They react to headlines. What they do not build is a coherent system. A system has order. A system has rules. A system has thresholds. A system decides in advance what happens when income arrives, where reserves sit, how debt is treated, how growth capital is deployed, how spending is questioned, how taxes are minimized legally. how earning power is upgraded, and how noise is prevented from taking command. Without that, you do not have a strategy. You have moods wearing financial clothes, and moods are excellent customers. That is why I push so hard against what I call the outer scorecard pipeline. A great many money decisions are not made for utility. They are made for appearance. People buy things to look stable. They buy things to look successful. They buy things to look generous. They buy things to look current. They buy things to avoid feeling excluded. They buy things to keep pace with circles they cannot actually afford. That creates a bizarre result. Their financial system becomes socially expressive but strategically incompetent. From the outside, the image improves. On the inside, the pressure rises. I have always believed that the inner scorecard matters more. Do your decisions increase actual control? Do they reduce dependence? Do they widen your reaction time? Do they strengthen reserves? Do they create ownership? Do they lower fragility? Do they produce a life with lower cortisol, fewer forced yeses, and more refusal power? That is the scoreboard that matters, because refusal power is one of the hidden fruits of well-managed money. A person with no reserves, no investment habit, high debt, high lifestyle burn, and no understanding of their own numbers is easy to push around. They cannot say no for long. They cannot walk away cleanly. They cannot absorb disruption. They cannot negotiate from calm. They cannot be patient. But the person who contains leaks, builds buffer, reduces bad debt, learns the numbers, respects structure, expands earning power, and starts ownership before they feel fully ready, begins to accumulate something larger than money. They accumulate backbone. They accumulate room. They accumulate time. They accumulate the right to think. And that right is precious. When I was younger, I cared a great deal about compounding because I understood the arithmetic. As I got older, I cared even more because I understood the emotional consequences. Compounding is not only a wealth mechanism, it is a pressure release mechanism. It allows your capital to start carrying some of the load your labor used to carry alone. That changes what kind of life is possible. But compounding cannot work honestly in a pipeline full of leaks. If money is constantly being drained by disorder, debt, blindness, inflated identity, weak tax handling, and chronic delay, then compounding is trying to irrigate a field with broken pipes. The solution is not one heroic month. The solution is redesign. You redesign the order. You redesign the defaults. You redesign what counts as normal. You redesign which expenses get emotional protection and which ones get brutal scrutiny. You redesign your understanding of safety. A lot of people think safety means having cash sitting where it feels comforting. Real safety is broader than that. Real safety is low bad debt. Real safety is a reserve that buys time. Real safety is knowing your numbers. Real safety is having enough humility to live below a level that flatters your ego. Real safety is investing soon enough that your future is not entirely chained to your labor. Real safety is earning power that can expand. Real safety is tax intelligence. Real safety is a life whose fixed burn does not force panic. That is a very different picture from what society usually sells. Society often sells visible comfort. I prefer invisible strength. Visible comfort impresses strangers. Invisible strength protects families. Visible comfort can be leased. Invisible strength has to be built. You can see this difference clearly in recessions, layoffs, divorces, health events, market drops, and all the other moments when life stops respecting your plans. The person who built around image gets exposed quickly. The person who built around resilience still feels pain, but they keep their options. That is the entire game in one sentence. Keep your options. Money, at its highest use, is not for applause. It is for options. The option to wait, the option to refuse, the option to leave, the option to recover, the option to think clearly because the rent is covered and the card is not on fire and the emergency did not knock you into submission. The option to act as a rational person instead of an economically cornered animal. Most people never frame personal finance this way. They frame it morally, socially, cosmetically, or emotionally. I frame it strategically. If a habit reduces your options, I treat it as expensive even when the price tag is small. If a habit expands your options, I treat it as valuable even when it looks boring. That is why paying yourself first matters. That is why bad debt is poison. That is why reserves matter. That is why knowing your numbers matters. That is why lifestyle inflation is dangerous. That is why expensive identities are costly. That is why increasing earning power matters. That is why taxes matter. That is why investing early matters. All of these are not separate tips. They are valves in the same system. Open the wrong valves and your future drains away. Close the leaks and the whole structure starts to pressurize. Then something beautiful happens. For the first time, each dollar that enters your life has a higher probability of staying useful. A portion is protected. A portion is growing. A portion is available for shocks. A portion is moving toward ownership. A portion is no longer working for lenders, impulse merchants, or bureaucratic ignorance. The system starts serving you instead of everyone around you. That is the inflection point most people miss. They keep searching for a miracle investment, a perfect side hustle, a magical strategy, or a secret the wealthy know. Usually the secret is more offensive to hear. It is that your current pipeline is too leaky to deserve spectacular results. That sounds harsh. It is also liberating because leaks can be fixed. You do not need to be born into a dynasty to change the order of operations in your own house. You do not need genius to stop financing bad debt. You do not need a trust fund to build a reserve. You do not need fame to understand your monthly numbers. You do not need a huge audience to earn more by becoming more useful. You do not need elite connections to learn the tax rules that apply to your own situation. You do not need perfect certainty to start investing. You need honesty. Honesty about what is draining you. Honesty about what looks normal but is actually expensive. Honesty about where you are confusing appearance with safety. Honesty about whether your current habits are building a private asset or simply feeding public. If you want a simpler way to say it, here it is. Stop worshiping inflow while ignoring leakage. A bigger paycheck poured into a broken system is not wealth. It is a wider stream entering the same cracked pipe. The question is not whether you can earn more. The question is whether what you earn will remain yours long enough to become freedom. I would rather trust a modest earner with a disciplined pipeline than a large earner with a glamorous mess, because over time, the disciplined pipeline becomes an engine of independence. The glamorous mess usually becomes an anxiety museum, and now you reach the real test. Not the test of intelligence. Not the test of whether you can quote financial books or repeat market phrases or sound informed at dinner. The real test is whether you are willing to offend your present self in order to protect your future self. Are you willing to put your future first in the payment order? Are you willing to stop financing ordinary life with expensive debt? Are you willing to sit on enough cash that life cannot bully you every time it sneezes? Are you willing to look directly at your numbers without flinching? Are you willing to admit that some of what you call taste is just rented identity? Are you willing to build earning power instead of only clipping coupons? Are you willing to learn the tax rules instead of donating lazily? Are you willing to begin investing before you feel theatrically ready? Because that is the door. On one side is the common life. Income arrives, leaks multiply, time passes, stress accumulates, freedom remains theoretical. On the other side is a quieter life. Money enters. Leaks are contained, pressure builds in the right direction, reserves deepen. Ownership expands, choices improve. Your future stops being an unpaid bill and starts becoming an asset under construction. Most people will stand at that door, nod politely, and go back to the pipeline that is draining them. A smaller group will close the valves. Those are the people who eventually discover that wealth is not first a number. It is control that no longer leaks away.